Hi, and welcome to The Conversation Piece from theconversationpodcast.com. I'm Amy Cooper here with Hillary Hansen, and Hillary tonight chose the topic of adoption. And little did I know before I started researching this that it is a very divisive topic. So if we didn't already alienate you with our circumcision podcast or our one about working mothers.
Oh, good one. Good one.
We might lose you tonight.
Yeah.
So Hillary, how come you chose adoption?
One of the reasons is because of the articles we read on circumcision. And in one of the articles that was against circumcision, it was saying that mothers with baby boys who circumcise their baby boys, they don't bond as well to their children. And I was so offended by that. I didn't realize it at the time. Do you ever do that? Do you ever get offended and you don't even get offended. You're just listening to stuff and then you go along and you're still mad and you kind of just stop and go, why am I mad? What irritated me? And that was what it really irritated me that article said that. Because the first thing that came into my mind was like, well, what about adoptive mothers? What about, and the other thing that I was thinking is, so I was thinking, I think that you can bond with anyone, anytime, any place, anywhere. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how old the infant is. I don't care how old anybody is. I think that you can bond with people. Otherwise, why would you get married? You know, I hear people say that. Just the other day, my sister was saying that. She's like, well, she's not a blood relative. I'm like, neither's my husband. But I love him more than anybody else in the world. We're completely bonded. It doesn't matter to me. You know, so.
And you think of the way you make connections, even with friends, that some people you feel so connected with from the beginning. Yeah. And you get to know them better and better, and the connection is still there and deepens. You know, so I agree that I wonder what that mother-child bonding is like. I have a couple of children. You have some children too. I have no idea what it would be like to have an adopted child. But from some of the stuff that we read, it sounds like they can, there's competing information, but it sounded like adopted parents, they feel as bonded to their children as they do to their biological children. Yeah. You know, in families where they have biological and adopted children.
Yeah. So, I've heard some women say, you know, some women of like 5 children, some are adopted, some are biological, them say, if you ask me which is your biological and which is your adopted, I mean, she's like, it would take me a minute. I would have to like seriously think about what you were talking about and why, wait, who's who?
Because she just thinks of them as her children.
They're all her children.
So should we share a little data?
Let's roll.
Okay. Well, you sent me this information. I thought it was interesting. Is this from Wikipedia?
Yeah. The history?
Yeah. One, it says that the adoption rate in the United States is about 3 per 100 live births. So that would be about 3%.
Did you think that was high? What do you think?
Yeah, I thought that was higher than I expected.
That's higher than I expected. Yeah. 3 out of 100. That's pretty high.
A little bit about the history of adoption. I had never even thought of this before. But I guess that it was this was in the 1800s, after the American Civil War. There had been a lot of rapid immigration, and results from the Civil War left a lot of children without parents. And there was just not enough room for them in orphanages, and they were kind of taking over urban centers. And so there was this guy, his name was Charles Loring Brace. Oh. He was a Protestant minister.
It's horrible.
And he said,
disgusting.
It is really sad.
Yeah.
He was appalled by the legions of homeless waifs roaming the streets of New York City. So what he planned to do was have all of these children, they were trained, like put on a train outside of the city to go out into rural areas.
Yeah.
And they were either adopted, which was less normal, or they became indentured servants.
Now, in their defense, though, I bet all kids were kind of indentured servants
at the time. Like you hear about families with 16 kids, and they were like one more laborer on the farm.
The other thing that
I had not thought of that.
Not that I condone violating child
exploitation.
Not that I condone that. I'm just saying. Back in the day, it's just what you did. But anyhow, the other thing that Charles Brace said was, Brace considered the abandoned youth, particularly Catholics, to be the most dangerous element challenging the city's order.
Why Catholic?
Catholic kids, really?
I don't get
if
that.
That's your biggest problem, dude.
That's a good life. Oh, but he was a Protestant minister.
Yeah.
I wonder if he had a little bit of that religious rivalry going on.
Yeah.
But I guess after this, they said it was the largest migration of children in history. And I said because of the degree of exploitation that occurred, it gave rise to new agencies and new laws that were there to protect children.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how adoption came to be. And
Did you mention that there were 200,000? Did you?
Oh, yeah. 200,000 kids
200,000
from that orphan train who were displaced. And they didn't even want them.
I can't even see. How much is 200,000? How much do stadiums seat? Like, I can't even see 200,000.
Oh, that would be stadiums full. Like, I think a big stadium doesn't it hold like 60,000 people. So that'd be like 3-4 stadiums. You sports fans maybe completely be like, that's not the size of the stadium. That's what I think. But it was saying, I guess in the early 1900s, Theodore Roosevelt, he joined efforts with the first White House Conference on the Care of Dependent Children. And they tried to start getting children placed into adoption. And so it says in 1923, only 2% of children without parental care were in adoptive homes. And less than 40 years later, nearly 1/3 were in adoptive homes. So it had a big effect.
But it seemed like the big changes, Amy, came in about 1945.
Oh, you mean when American attitudes kind of changed about adoption?
Yeah.
It sounded like it was after the World War II.
Because it seemed like they were saying that adoption was kind of frowned upon because you didn't know the genetic origins of the child that you were getting. And then after what Americans saw what the Nazis did to people, they were so appalled by that whole genetics or supreme genetics or everything that they completely readjusted their images about that and then started it seemed like adoption was a little bit more favorably perceived after that. Did you get that?
Yeah, I agree. And it said that the scientific community, they began to stress the dominance of nurture over genetics.
Okay, let's just stop right there. Nature versus nurture.
This is the age-old question.
Just initial thoughts, initial reactions? Mine's 60-40.
So nature versus nurture. And I remember learning about this in like Psych 101, freshman year in college. And they always say both. They're like, you can't say one or the other. It has to be both. And I remember reading, this was years ago, and I may have the reference totally wrong, but I read Freakonomics, that book. And I believe that it talked about children who had been adopted, that they trended to being more like their adoptive parents up through the age 18. And then as they got older, they trended more and more towards becoming like their biological parents. And if I can find that reference, I will be elated. I didn't spend enough time looking for it. But it made me think, do we, as we surround ourselves in our family environment, we're more like our families. And there was actually a study that kind of backs that up. It's called the Sibling Interaction and Behavior Study.
That was a great study.
It was launched in 1999 by the University of Minnesota Center for Twin and Family Research. And incidentally, it's funded by the National Institute of Health, which generally I think lends credibility to a study because it's not one group that's trying to find a specific aim. So it's kind of an unbiased study. But what they found is that there was virtually no difference in psychological functioning between children raised in adoptive families and those raised in biological families. And what was interesting is they looked often at families where there was an adopted child and at least one other child who was biological, so that they could really pin out the differences. These children are raised in the same environment, but the differences being due to genetics rather than to their environment. And it said that so there was almost no difference in psychological functioning between children raised in adoptive families, and that sibling relationships appear unaffected by adoption, that parents and children felt as attached to each other in adoptive families as in biological families. And it did say, I think this is an ongoing study, and at the time that it reported it was still going on, and the adolescents were up to age 15. So it didn't take it, like the Freakonomics example, past 18 and to see what would happen afterwards. But it did show a big impact on nurture, at least when they were, and it sounded like they had their IQs trended more towards their adoptive parents than they would have expected.
That's amazing.
It still wasn't as close as it would have been for biological children.
See, I can see grades being very close to what your adoptive parents are, but IQ, that one's interesting.
I know, and academic achievement and I think ambition, they found were similar between adopted children and the ones who are biological children. So I thought that was really good news, you know, because we read some other information. Should I even bring it up?
I don't know. It just gives it credibility, and it bothers me that it was propaganda, as we would call it.
But it was the thing. Okay, what we're referring to is there was a study. Well, it was appendices from a paper written by Ginnie Snodgrass for George Fox University in 1998, and it really says that adopted children have a lot of mental disorders. It just sounded like children who'd been adopted have a litany of problems in a much higher proportion than biological children would have been. So there is some conflicting data out there.
See, and I wish that you could counter that data with, if you took that adopted child and compared it to the children that the mother kept.
Like, that would be a good study.
Who has more problems? I'm going to guess the children that the mother kept. But So the other day I was watching Good Morning America. Did you ever watch that? I know you're a Today Show fan.
I used to watch the Today Show all the time when my oldest daughter was just little, like when she was 1. And I never have time to get a show in because now we're watching Super Y in the morning. And we're watching Dragon
Wyatt.
Train.
There's a name for your son, Wyatt. I love that name.
Oh, okay.
Wyatt Cooper. That's a great name. Anyhow, so I was watching Good Morning America, and there is this new movie out called The Blind Side.
Yeah.
And
I want to see it.
I kind of do.
Do you want to see it?
I kind of do. And I'm not a movie person, but it is about this family. It's a husband and wife, and they had a teenage daughter and kind of a younger son. I think he was around 9. And they kind of adopt this, I think he was 18 when they adopted him. And anyhow, and they totally turned his life around, and he became a football player. And anyhow, so I
went on to become a professional football player, right?
Yeah, it said he becomes an All-American offensive left tackle. That is Greek to me, but I'm sure some people know that means. But anyhow, so I'm watching this interview, and again, I'm knowing that we're going to do this podcast on adoption, and I'm watching this interview, and I am watching this mother, and here this boy is 18 when she adopted him. I mean, that seems a little bit old. It seems like he was 16, but anyhow.
Yeah, he must have been a little younger. He had some time in high school, right?
Yeah.
It seems like.
So we'll just say
Go
16.
watch the movie, and then you'll know.
Yeah. But so I'm watching not Sandra Bullock, but I'm watching the real mother do this interview, and this woman is just beaming with pride, just like it's her son. Like there is no difference between this boy and her son. And so they start asking her, how is it for your other kids to adjust to this new boy in the house? And she said, we don't even remember life without him. And I thought, that is so true. I mean, I can't remember life. I can barely remember life without Max, without my middle son. So I just kept thinking about bonding and just how important, not when you get your child, from where you get your child, just who you are and how you bond with people.
How do you think you bond with people?
I think that's a good question, because there are certain people that I don't bond with or that I don't mesh with at all. And so I keep thinking that. But there was a great quote from C.S. Lewis that I posted on my other blog. And C.S. Lewis says, affection is responsible for 9/10 of whatever solid and durable happiness there is in our lives. So I think that's a good one. Affectionate. I have a son, my oldest son, Warren. He's very, I don't know how to say it. He's not affectionate. He is very fast. He's very aggressive, and he's just always on the go. And so, and when he was younger, we did spank him. Not like on a weekly basis, but probably once a month if he got out of line. And I remember thinking, I don't know if this is good for our bonding. I don't know if this is good for our relationship. But my sister Karen told me, she's like, what you need to do is you need to touch him a lot in like very nice settings.
In positive ways?
Mm-hmm.
Like and hugs, you mean, and high fives?
It doesn't even have to be that formal as hugs. Or it can be like, this is a really soft coat. Warren, come and feel this soft coat. Like he has to be associated with soft touch just as much as he is with any other kind of touch. So, but I think affection is a good way to bond with people.
It is interesting, though, that with adopted children, at least from some things that we've read, and it seems like kids who have been adopted, they always kind of wonder, like, do I want to meet my birth parents? And for some people, it's really a longing. And I think same for birth parents, at least according to this appendices from George Fox University. It said that 96% of birth mothers want a reunion. So it does seem like people still have that longing for their biological roots, to know what their past is, so they can kind of see what the present means and where they're going in the future. I think that people, it does seem from what I've read and from my experience, people do have that longing, and it's very real, regardless of how they bonded with their adoptive parents. They just, it just seems like they think there's someone else out there. And
I guess, Amy, like, I feel, again, like, I don't have a lot of experience with this either, but I feel like my heart goes out to, my compassion is extended the most toward the woman who adopts. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't imagine, as much as I hate pregnancy, which is on a scale of...
She really hates it. I promise.
I can't even say it. This podcast isn't long enough for me to describe my contempt for pregnancy. But I really do have sincere, just heartbreaking compassion for people who can't have kids. So I feel like adoption is the great answer. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember there was an article in Good Housekeeping, and it was talking about this woman who gave up her child for adoption. She said, I wanted to apologize to him for abandoning him. And I was so offended by that article. And I wrote a letter to the editor about how offended I was by the use of the word abandonment, even in the title, that they were using that word. And I thought, I think that women who give their children up for adoption should be heralded as the heroes and answers to blessings that they are. Mm-hmm. Because who else can fulfill that void besides an adoptive mother or a woman who gives her baby up for adoption? It's not even possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, and it was interesting in this George Fox thing, how it said, I was trying to find what are the demographics of mothers who give their children up for adoption. And I couldn't find much, but in this George Fox article, it was interesting that it said, generally the reasons for surrender centered around being single, poverty, young age, and parental pressure. Mm-hmm. So, and it's interesting, at least for me, when I think of the families who want a child so badly, thinks of them being able to offer a child a mother and a father in a home where money probably isn't an issue, and, where they can have opportunities for education and love, and having a mother and a father in the home. So I really think, I can't imagine what it would be like to give up a baby for adoption, but I can really see a mother putting that baby above herself and trying to place that baby in the best environment to be raised. So I can see how it wouldn't be abandonment at all. Yeah. Trying to give your baby the best life that you can. Yeah. But still, I can understand how there'd be that longing there from both mother and child to know each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight for the conversation piece from theconversationpodcast.com. I don't really know what our point was tonight.
I think our point is blood relatives it is not everything. Your husband isn't your blood relative, and you can bond. You can bond with anybody, anytime.
Well, thanks for joining us. Check out our website for the articles that we referenced, and we'll talk to you next time.